Good morning, everyone. Happy Graduation Sunday. This is an exciting Sunday. Nothing special in the Sunday school time, but in our morning service, we're going to have Graduation Sunday, and we get to acknowledge and honor all the graduates from high school and from college, and that'll be a great time. You'll notice a lot of the pews in the front of the auditorium are sectioned off and reserved for the graduates' families, which I'm sure is why everybody else is sitting in the back, even now. Because nobody wants to sit in the back for a church service. Everybody wants the good seats up front. So this plays in. Now, at least today, you have an excuse why you're not sitting in the front, right? You get to sit in the back in good conscience because, hey, they're all reserved. You don't want to take somebody's seat. Very good. We're going to continue in Lamentations today where we left off last week. I just saw in the bulletin today that today is also the newcomers' lunch after the morning service. I saw that at first and I was confused. I thought, which newcomers are here? That's not if your last name is Newcomer. We have some newcomers in the area. So I thought, family reunion or something, going on the FLC. No, if you are new in coming to our church, that is for you. And so hopefully that's all signed up and taken care of at this point. Last week we left off kind of in Lamentations, but we didn't really read any of Lamentations, did we? All we talked about last week after the book of Jeremiah, which is the prophet who was kind of prophesying during the end of and during the destruction of Jerusalem, a sad, catastrophic failure of a book in terms of the people, and we get to see the culminations of years and years and years of all the prophets warning the people that their sin and their rebellion would bring about the destruction of their nation and their country and their way of life. And Jeremiah was the one where all of that came to fruition, all that happened. And God, through Jeremiah, says, look, this is why the destruction is coming upon you. There's no turning back. It is here, and this is why it's happening. And Jeremiah, the same prophet, we believe also wrote Lamentations, and it's just a sad, sad song about what he sees throughout the destruction and the pain and suffering of Jerusalem as it falls and suffers and starves and is slaughtered, and the people are just suffering and wiped out. It's a sad, sad book. And last week we talked mainly about the structure of Lamentations, didn't we? We didn't really get into the book itself. That's what we'll do this morning. But we said last week that the structure was a chiastic acrostic series of quina, meter, dirges. And we said, what is that? So we kind of went line by line. Acrostic means? Yeah, alphabetical all the way down. In our case, the way our scriptures are formatted, that means every verse starts with the next letter of the alphabet. Of course, it was in Hebrew, but the English equivalent would be verse 1 starts with A, verse 2 starts with B, verse 3 is C, and all the way down. And you'll notice that chapters 1 through 4 are all either 22 verses or at least multiple of 22. Chapters 3 is 66, which means the first 3 verses are A and the second 3 verses are B all the way down. So it's an acrostic. An acrostic helped with kind of two things. One is memory, if you want it to stick in your mind, but 2, it signifies that the destruction and the judgment of God and the suffering, he did a very complete and thorough job, complete from A to Z is how we'd say it in our culture, right? Complete from A to Z. Everything God had said would happen has now happened. This is the judgment he said would come, and it is here, and he did a very thorough job at it. As far as a dirge is just a sad mourning song that you'd often hear at funerals or times of mourning. Just a very, very sad song of lament, which is why we call it Lamentations. Quina or Kina, however you would pronounce that. That's the one where we talked about the meter and the flow of the poem. Remember, it was kind of a broken, limpy, incomplete, doesn't quite work right, leaves you feeling a little bit off and a little bit disjointed type of meter. I think I used the example last week of roses are red, right? Roses are red, violets are blue, quinas sound strange to read, and that's where it ends. And then you start again, and you say, but wait, there should be another beat there. There should be another couple syllables to finish it off. And he writes that way just to show, again, the broken, destructed, distorted, disjointed situation and status of Jerusalem and its people, and nothing is right, nothing is satisfying, everything is wrong, everything's broken, everything's torn down, and so he uses that to kind of poetically communicate that sense and that message and that feeling. So we're going to, and finally, chiasm, that's what we see up on the board there. One last structure that he includes here, and Jeremiah did a very fabulous literary job of combining all these different poetic facets here to communicate his message and his feeling. We see kind of a mirror image as the book continues. There's 5 chapters throughout the book. Chapters 1 and 5 kind of talk about and describe Jerusalem's destruction. Chapters 2 and 4 talked about God's judgment and his wrath. In other words, this is why the destruction and the suffering have taken place. Chapter 3 is kind of sticking out there on the right and kind of the pinnacle, the point of the X, of the chiasm there. It's kind of the focus of the book. And if you ever hear a message that involves or is on Lamentations, or in other words, if you're ever sitting in a sermon and you hear Lamentations referenced, I almost guarantee that reference will come from chapter what? Chapter 3. And part of me says, make sure we don't ignore the rest of the book, because that's not good, because chapter 3, frankly, are the only positive verses in the whole book. But the other part of me says, well, but that is the focus of the book. And the focus of the book is made even more poignant, and it stands out so much more if you give the background of the rest of the book of the suffering. And that's what we're going to go through today. But almost always, if you hear Lamentations referenced in a message, by the way, mental note, next time you do, I almost promise you it'll be out of chapter 3, because that's the most talked about portion of the book. So we're going to continue to actually read some of Lamentations today. Some books that we cover are very deep philosophically, and we can really, really think and analyze them. Some of them are very deep theologically. Some of them contain a lot of information that we can really ponder and think. Lamentations is not that way. There's not a lot to learn per se. There's not a lot of new. We don't. How do I want to say this? It's not a thought-provoking book as much as some of the others. Job and Ecclesiastes and some of the other, or the law, where we really think and say, now, why did God put these laws in here, and what can we learn from them? It's a really intellectual, thought-intensive book. Lamentations is not that way. Lamentations is more a very emotionally thorough book, isn't it? We don't learn a whole lot intellectually and mentally, but we feel and we experience what it's like to be under God's judgment and the severity of it, and the depth of judgment and suffering that the people's sin and rebellion had brought about. It really is a lament for the people and for the country. And so there's not a lot to think through and not a whole lot to analyze. That makes it no less valid or no less valuable, because it communicates exactly what God wanted to communicate to and from the people about the depth and the suffering. And this is not a place you want to be, and this is not the kind of relationship you want to have with God at this time. So chapter 1 talks about, as I said, Jerusalem's destruction. And again, don't think your way through this much as you feel your way through this book. And it's not often I say that, because we don't want to be guided by feelings and all that kind of stuff. That's not great. But this book is, all about the description and the feeling. And so just feel your way through this book as we read through it. Chapter 1, verse 1. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she who was great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all of her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They've become her enemies. Who are her friends and her lovers, by the way? We've talked about this in previous prophets and books and stuff. Who is Judah's lovers and her friends? Quote, friends. Who are they? All the other nations that she has courted throughout the decades and centuries, when she should have been relying and focused on God, she says, no, I'm going to relate and gather in all the other people. I'm going to adopt their ways. I'm going to adopt their religion, their idols, their practices. I'm going to just I'm going to become multicultural. That's a fun phrase in our society today. Multicultural means I'm going to learn everything I can from the people instead of learning everything I can from God. Yeah, and I'm going to take my cues from all the society instead of taking my cues from God. And so Judah had become very, very multicultural, which in God's view is not a good thing. God says you're not supposed to learn from them. You're supposed to learn from me. You're not supposed to imitate them. You're supposed to imitate me. And so countless times throughout the prophets, God says you have run off, you committed adultery with all the other people and all the other nations and all their gods. You've prostituted yourselves among them. And so at this time, God is kind of saying in this verse, so where are all of your friends? Where did they go? Are they here to save you? Are they here to pat you on the back and make you feel better? Are they going to take care of you now? No, they've deserted you. You are left all alone. They've abandoned you. They're nowhere to be found. All these people that you spent all your time and energy and dedication on, they are nowhere to be seen. You are left alone. You're abandoned. Okay, sorry, that's all in verse 2. Verse 3 continues, Judah has gone into exile because of affliction and hard servitude. She dwells now among the nations, but finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. Continue in verse 11. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. Is it nothing to you, all who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which is brought upon me, which the Lord has inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. And I wish the broken little limpy meter showed up in English. Of course, he translated in English and all that is gone. But just imagine reading all that in a stilted, awkward kind of rhythm, and it comes out even better. Verses 12 through 22, again, continues to reflect Jerusalem's cry for help for any kind of help, really. Verse 15, the Lord rejected all of my mighty men in my midst. He summoned an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden as in a winepress the virgin daughter of Judah. For these things I weep, my eyes flow with tears. For a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Verse 18, the Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. Everything that's happened to me, I deserve every last bit of it because he's punishing me for what I did. But hear, all you peoples, and see my suffering. My young women and my young men have gone into captivity. I called to my lovers. Again, we already talked about who the lovers are. I called to my lovers, but they've deceived me. My priests and the elders have perished in the city while they sought for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, for I am in distress. My stomach churns. My heart is wrung within me because I have been very rebellious. In the streets, the sword bereaves. In the house, it is like death. Mourning, sadness, suffering everywhere, deceit, despair, despondency, betrayal, everything. Nothing is right. Everything's broken. Everything's falling apart. Chapter 2, he continues as we move down the point of that graph that I gave you earlier. Chapter 2 talks about God's anger and his judgment, and especially in the first 7 verses, this really, really pops out. Look at who is the subject of all of the sentences here. Look who's doing all of the action, and I'll read it to you in a way that you can pick it out. How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth with the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the days of his anger. The Lord has swallowed up with mercy all the inhabitants of Jacob. Are you starting to get the idea now? The end of verse 2. He has brought down to the ground in dishonor the kingdom and its rulers. Verse 3, he has cut down in fierce anger. He has withdrawn them from his right hand. He has burned like a flaming fire. Verse 4, he has bent his bow like an enemy. He has killed all who were delighted in our eyes. The end of verse 4, he has poured out his fury like fire. Verse 5, the Lord has become like an enemy. He has swallowed up his palaces. He has laid it in ruins. He has multiplied in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. Verse 6, he has laid waste his booth like a garden. The Lord has made Zion forget festivals. He has spurned the king and the priest. Are you getting the flow yet? Have you gotten it? Verse 7, the Lord has scorned his altar. He has delivered into the hand of the enemy. Verse 8, the Lord has determined to lay in ruins the walled daughter of Zion. He has caused the rampart and the wall to lament. He did not restrain his hand. All these things, all this suffering, all this destruction, who has done it? Who is this from? Why has this happened? Jeremiah asks. It's an easy answer. It should be an easy answer, but it's very profound because it's very important in understanding why this punishment is taking place. Who's done it all? Who's responsible for the suffering? Yeah, sure, I'll ask it like that before I fix it. Who has caused all the suffering? Who's responsible? God is. And yet it's not his fault, is it? He might be responsible for what's happened, but it's not his fault because all that suffering that God is bringing upon them, is because of the people's rebellion. The people rebelled against God, forced God's hand into causing all this pain and this suffering. But the people deserve every last bit of it. Verses 10 through 22 of the same chapter, he continues. Pick it up in verse 11. He says, "My eyes are spent with weeping. My stomach churns. My bile is poured out onto the ground because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. Because infants and babies faint in the streets of the city. They cry to their mothers, 'Where is bread and wine?' as they faint like a wounded man in the streets of the city, as their life is poured out on their mother's bosom. What can I say for you to compare to you, O daughter of Jerusalem? What can I liken to you that I may comfort you, O virgin daughter of Zion? For your ruin is vast like the sea. Who can heal you?" Verse 17, "The Lord has done what he has purposed. He has carried out his word." We talked about this before. Everything that was promised was prophesied, predicted, and this was part of the covenant that they signed. He has carried out his word, which he commanded long ago. He has thrown down without pity. He has made the enemy rejoice over you and exalted the mighty of your foes. Verse 20, "Look, O Lord, and see. With whom have you dealt thus?" In other words, who else is like this? Who else have you done this to? "Should women eat the fruit of their womb, the children of their tender care?" Talking about the starvation and the suffering going on in the city. The people have nothing else to eat, and so the women are killing their own children and eating them just to survive. And that sounds like, speaking in hyperbole or an exaggeration, but it was not. That was going on. "Women should eat the fruit of their womb, the children of their tender care. Should priest and prophet be killed in the sanctuary of the Lord?" Which also happened during this time. Focusing on the hopelessness and the people's grief and their desperation as they suffer under God's righteous condemnation. And the people have brought it on themselves. Whew. Painful, painful. Continue on in chapter 3. As we already said before, this chapter is 3 times longer than the other chapter in terms of number and verses. It focuses on the book it is the focus of the book as a whole. You remember that thing we talked about earlier. It deals with Jeremiah's distress, but also his hope and trust in God. And all the suffering and the pain and the judgment and the condemnation that we've read in the previous couple of chapters all lead up to chapter 3. Because chapter 3, at least most of it, parts of it, sound almost irrationally kind of positive. But put it in the context of everything we see. Nothing but pain and suffering as far as the eye can see. And yet in the middle of it, Jeremiah, the author, says this. And he describes more pain and suffering in the first several verses of chapter 3. Pick it up in verse 16. He finishes his description here of all the suffering he's been through, the physical things going on. Verse 16, "He has made my teeth grind on gravel. He's made me cower in the ashes. My soul is bereft of peace. I've forgotten what happiness is. And so I say, my endurance has perished. So has my hope from the Lord." After describing all these things, which we could read, but for time we didn't, but all the pain and suffering he's going through physically and mentally and emotionally, all these things, he says, "My soul is bereft of peace. I have no peace in myself. I have forgotten what happiness is." I can't even remember what it's like to be happy and satisfied and peaceful. I can't even remember. And so, verse 18, as a result, here's what I say, "My endurance has perished. I cannot hold on. I cannot put up any longer. I've run out of strength. I've run out of patience. I've run out of endurance. I am kaput. It's over. Flop in the dust. Lay on the ground. I'm done." And he ends the verse by saying, "And so has my hope from the Lord." My hope is completely gone out. I have no more hope from the Lord. It's over. Finito. I give up. I quit. Kill me now. I cannot take it any longer. But he doesn't stop there. He continues to the next verse. And the next passage seems to contradict what he just said in this verse. Because look what he says in verse 19. He turns to God and he addresses him directly. He says, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall, the bitterness that I'm going through. My soul continually remembers it, and it is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." Now, not 2 verses earlier, he said, "My hope is dead, I have no more." And here he says, "Now I have hope again." Why does he have hope again? Where did that come from? What has happened? He says, there's something that when I reach this point that I call into my mind, and when I call it into my mind, now I have hope again. Continue in verse 22. Here's what it is. It's that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. By the way, that hymn that we sing, great is thy faithfulness. Oh, this is the verse where it comes from. But the setting that it comes from is completely, I'll use the word, completely irrational, completely counterintuitive. It makes no sense. He sees nothing but pain and suffering as far as the eye can see. I have no hope. I have no more strength. I have no more endurance. And then he says, great is your faithfulness. His mercies are new every morning. And he's going to wake up tomorrow morning, and you know what he's going to see? What's he going to see? Come on, tell me, what's he going to see? More pain and suffering. That's what he's going to see. So why does he say your mercies are new every morning if God's mercies don't fix the problems and make everything go away and everything's all good? Does that make sense? Let's keep reading. Maybe we'll figure it out. Verse 24, the Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Very positive and very uplifting and very inspiring verses. And as I said before this morning, if you ever hear a message on Lamentations, that's the passage it's going to come from right there, because it feels much better than the previous 2 chapters do. Nobody wants to hear about gall spilling out and eating your children. People just don't want to hear about that. And so we talk about great is your faithfulness. He juxtaposes the two here. He says, great is your faithfulness, new mercies every day. He's my portion. I'll have hope in him. In the midst of all the stuff that's going on. And Jeremiah, of all people, knows full well that he's going to wake up tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And there's going to be more pain, more poverty, more suffering, more destruction. And all of this hope does not fix the situation. So why does he say, my hope is new every morning, great is your faithfulness? Doesn't hope in God make all the problems evaporate and go away just like that? And the answer is, no, not necessarily. That's not how that works. Hope in God doesn't mean your problems go away. So what does it mean? It means that all the problems and suffering you have, A, are for a purpose, B, that God's in charge of it, and C, ultimately someday everything will be set right. Even if here in this life, on this earth right now, the pain and the problems don't go away, and you still have the suffering, and you still have the consequence, and you still have all the things that you're lamenting, you can still have hope in God that he will not abandon you on a personal level. Again, that doesn't fix all the problems on a physical or financial or social or whatever level, societal level. It doesn't fix all the problems. But he is still with you. He's still doing what's right. He still cares for you, even if there are problems going on. And it's amazing how he puts those two together. I mean, if I was writing a book like this, frankly, I probably wouldn't put that part of chapter 3 in there. I'd probably be a little bit too stuck on what's going on. I'd say, woe is me, I'm done. And just kind of flop over in the dust, and that'd be. But he puts these two together. He says, "Great is your faithfulness." Even though everything is going wrong, nothing is right, and even chapter 3 is written in that off-kilter, dissatisfying kind of meter. He says, "Still, in the midst of the brokenness, you're still here and you're still faithful to us. Even though everything is wrong, you are still right." Continues in verse 31. He says, "For the Lord will not cast off forever." And it's fun he says that, by the way, because Jeremiah, of all people, the prophet, he knew full well that he would never see any kind of restoration of the nation. He knew it. He knew it full well. But he says, the Lord won't cast off forever. I still have hope in him, even though I know that I personally will never personally live to see the day when God restores the nation and restores prosperity and the people are back in land. I will never see it. Still, my hope is in God, and he will set things right. Verse 31 again. "For the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he cause grief, he will have compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of men." He doesn't enjoy doing this. This is not who he wants to be. He has to be the righteous God, and that's part of his character, but he doesn't take joy in punishing people and causing them distress. Skip ahead to verse 58. "You have taken up my cause, O Lord. You have redeemed my life. You've seen the wrong done to me, O Lord. Judge my cause. You have seen all their vengeance, all their plots against me. Set things right, Lord. Verse 64, you will repay them, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. You will give them dullness of heart. Your curse will be on them. You will pursue them in anger and destroy them from under your heavens, O Lord. God, you are righteous. You're going to set things straight. All the wrong will be righted. All the good will be rewarded. Someday, when you set things right, great is your faithfulness. You never leave and abandon us. And that's chapter 3. Then we get down to chapter 4 again. If you remember the chart, what happens in chapter 4? We kind of start to, I don't want to use the word digress again because that's not really right. God doesn't digress. But we kind of start to backtrack on that little chart that I gave you. You remember we kind of ascended to the point, the climax of chapter 3, where he says, despite all the problems that have been and that I've seen and that I've experienced, God is still with me even in the midst of it. But in chapter 4 and chapter 5, he goes right back to what? The suffering and the pain all over again. Let's read part of chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 4, we'll pick it up. The tongue of the nursing infant sticks to the roof of its mouth for thirst. The children beg for food, but no one gives to them. Those who once feasted on delicacies perish in the street. Those who were brought up in purple embrace the ash heaps. Verse 10, the hands of the compassionate women have boiled their own children. They became their food during the destruction of the daughter of my people. Verse 13, why did this happen? This was for the sins of her prophets, for the iniquities of her priests, who shed in the midst of her the blood of the righteous. Verse 16, the Lord himself has scattered them. He will regard them no more. No honor was shown to the priest or favor to the elders. Our eyes have failed, ever watching vainly for help. In our watching we watched for a nation which could not save. They dogged our steps so that we could not walk in the streets. Our end drew near, our days were numbered, for our end had come. Again, just like in chapter 2, he describes in unfortunate, gory detail all the suffering that's going on. He reiterates that all this is their fault. It's because of what they had done that all this suffering is occurring. So once again, after describing the horrible condition of Jerusalem, he reminds the people that their misery is because of God's judgment upon their wickedness, again reflective of what we saw in chapter 2. Finally, we get to chapter 5, and again, talking about the suffering of the people. But this chapter is just a little bit different from the others in that what? All that rhyme, meter stuff that we talked about in the first 4 chapters, we don't see that happen in chapter 5. That's not present. And he abandons that for some reason in chapter 5. In chapter 5, I'll be honest, I don't really know what kind of cadence it follows, but it's not the same one as before. It's not the same broken, disjointed one. It's, I don't know if I want to say fixed again, but it's more of a normal type meter. Why did he do that? And it's also not an acrostic anymore. It's not A to Z anymore. It's just kind of like I've written it and I've said what I have to say, and there's still the suffering, but I'm going to say something else. And I think the reason is because of how the chapter closes, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So chapter 5 is different from the other chapters. It's not an acrostic. It doesn't have the broken rhythm. It focuses on Jerusalem's destruction, but also includes Jeremiah's response on behalf of the people to God's judgment. So take a look at chapter 5. We'll pick it up in verse 6. Again, he describes when we're suffering. We have given the hand to Egypt and to Assyria to get bread enough. Our fathers have sinned. We are no more. We bear their iniquities. Slaves rule over us. There is none to deliver us from their hand. We get our bread at the peril of our lives because swords in the wilderness. Our skin is hot as an oven with the burning heat of famine. Women are raped in Zion, young women in the towns of Judah. Princes are hung up by their hands. No respect is shown to the elders. Young men are compelled to grind at the mill. Boys stagger under loads of wood. Again, graphic description of what life is like to those who still have life. And their life is not much of a life because it's nothing but misery and suffering, everything we've seen before. But he gets down to verse 19, and he makes one little turn, one final twist. And again, in my opinion, this is why he's abandoned that broken, disjointed cadence that he had before. He turns to God in verse 19 and says, "But you, O Lord, you reign forever. Your throne endures to all generations. Why do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us for so many days?" He turns to God and says, Are you going to punish us forever? Is this the way it's always going to be? Do we have no more hope? Verse 21, he says, "Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. renew our days of old, unless you have utterly rejected us, and you remain exceedingly angry with us. If there is any hope for us, God, restore us, come back to us, fix us, unless you've abandoned us forever, which we know from chapter 3 that's not the case, because he already addressed that by saying, you are our hope, you are our faithfulness, you are our mercy. So he says, if there's any way for us to be fixed, it's going to have to come from you. And again, I think it's fascinating that Jeremiah says that, because he knew full well as a prophet of God that restoration would not come in his lifetime. He would never see things restored the way that they once were. He'd never see that mercy accomplished, that faithfulness brought into, I don't want to say existence because it already exists, but into a form that we could see. Nobody would be brought back. Nobody would be restored in his lifetime. And yet he still says, I know you're going to do this for us because you have promised that you would. Therefore, even if it doesn't affect me personally on a physical level in my lifetime, still I will be faithful to you, and my hope is in you because I know you're doing the right thing. And that's the end of the book. Kind of a different book, isn't it? Kind of a sad book, a lament book, which you would expect. But fascinating, I don't want to say contradiction, but on a surface level, sounds contradictory. And yet he puts both of those in there. And I think, again, it plays out so well to how we see our lives too. He starts out by saying, everything I see is misery. Great is God's faithfulness. And then he continues with the suffering, saying, even though I know that God's faithfulness is here, I know it's not going to solve all the problems right now in this life. And I still have to go through the suffering for 2 more chapters of my life until it's all over. But someday I know that God will fix things and set things right. That sounds exactly like what we say today too, is it not? We see all kinds of yuckiness going on in life. We know God is faithful, but we don't see it now, and we have to live through potentially the rest of our lives unless he comes back. But the foreseeable future of our lives with more of the yuckiness in the world. And yet we know that God's the faithful one, and he's the one that we depend on ultimately to set everything right. Just like Jeremiah. Isn't that fun? Now all we have to do is learn how to write in that weird meter, and we'll be okay. And we can write our own books. All right, we have just a little bit of time left this morning. We're going to cover one more book this morning. Next week I want to do something just a little bit different. It's the last Sunday of the quarter. So we're not going to start a new book, but it's kind of a clean stopping point because we're at the exile now. It's kind of a breaking point for the people, a breaking point for us, because now we're going to take a quarter off before we come back and finish the rest of the Old Testament next fall. But we're going to look at the book of Obadiah in the few minutes we have left. One short little chapter, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. If you can't find it, I'll give you just a couple minutes. Obadiah is another kind of a weird, quirky book. Why is the book written? What is the point? And I'll show you that here in just a minute after people find it. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, right in the middle of all those little teeny ones. So if you can find the tiny house portion of your Old Testament, it's right in the middle of there, okay? Obadiah. I've subtitled Obadiah, What Goes Around Comes Around. Yes. Secular people call it karma, don't they? I don't like the phrase karma because it talks about justice from an impersonal, non-living universe. We know that there is justice and there is a karma effect, but it's not from an impersonal universe. It comes from a very personal, all-knowing God who is righteous and just. Obadiah, what goes around comes around. The author, of course, is Obadiah. We know that from chapter 1, verse 1. The readers, catch this, the readers are Judah shortly before or possibly shortly after the exile. Same time frame as Jeremiah. They would have been concurrent prophets. The message is that, true to his word, God is still blessing those who bless you and cursing those who curse you. Where do I get that phrase from? Does anybody remember? It should be a familiar phrase by now, but we haven't mentioned it for a little while. If you don't remember, we'll come back to it. The structure is this. Apparently a summary of judgments against Edom, repeated mostly from Joel, Amos, and Jeremiah. There's not a whole lot of new information in Obadiah, and yet it's repeated one more time for the people as they're being exiled and destroyed from their homeland. So it's about Edom. So we need a little background here as a refresher. Hopefully that's large enough you can see. Background of the book, Edom. Who is Edom? Those are the descendants of Jacob's brother Esau. So if you remember way back, you have Jacob and Esau, 2 brothers. Jacob got the inheritance and the blessing. He also, along with the blessing comes with God's promise and covenant to Abraham and Isaac. That was inherited by Jacob. Jacob has kids, their kids have kids, blah, blah, blah. They turn into a nation called Israel, right? God's chosen people. But there was another brother back there, wasn't Jacob and Esau. What happens to Esau? God said to Esau, don't worry, I will make you into a nation too. And he did. That nation became known as the Edomites. But they did not stay in the land of promise. They did not inherit that blessing and the promise and the covenant from Abraham. And so they were kind of outside of the land, outside of the covenant. They became their own nation, but a very separate nation from God's chosen people, the descendants of Jacob. So Edom, the descendants of Jacob's brother Esau, had been hostile towards Israel for some time. Just like the brothers initially did not get along all that well, so their descendants did not get along all that well. For some time, they kind of lived in separate areas and separate, Edom had their area and Israel had their area. Then, of course, they all went down to Egypt, and they were enslaved in Egypt for 400 and some odd years. They came out of Egypt. They came back to the Promised Land. But ever since they came back to the Promised Land, there have been tension between the two nations. They had refused passage to Israel on their way out of Egypt. They were not helpful at that time. They attacked Israel, I'll say several times, but multiple times throughout their history. They even cheered on and they helped when Israel and Judah were finally overthrown and put into exile. So they were very antagonistic to their, can you call them brothers, I guess? I mean, so many generations back. But their relative people, their relative nation, very hostile, very antagonistic. They were enemies. They did not like each other at all. And when finally Israel and Judah were overthrown, they sat on the sidelines, or maybe even they came in and helped and said, yay, Israel's being overthrown. Now we can maybe have some of their land and take some of their stuff for us. Hooray, go Babylonians, go Assyrians, yay. And they're flying their little flags and pom-poms and cheerleaders, cheering on Assyria and Babylon, stuff like that. Take down Israel, take down Judah, get them out of here. So they were not helpful, not friendly to God's people. So although Israel had ruled over Edom for much of the time since David, as was predicted, by the way, back in Genesis chapter 25, which contributed to the hostilities. Nobody likes to be ruled over for that long. Edom was always causing trouble and tension against God's people. And so when the people fell or were in the process of being exiled, there's the people of Edom lined up across the border, cheering and yelling and saying, yay, get rid of these Israelites so we can come in and take their land, and we never like them anyway, and get them out of here, and they're kind of bullies and we don't like them. And so this book of Obadiah shows up, but as I said before, it's about, or it's written to the people of Edom, but the readers are, we believe, the people of Judah. So why would you write a story to, or a book to, or about one nation, but it was probably never even read by that nation? I don't know that for sure, but I don't think it probably was. So why would you write a book to a people that never gets to read it and you give it to these people instead? Does that make any sense? If I write a book to you and I only let you read it, why would I do this? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it kind of does make sense, and we'll go through that here shortly. The book of Obadiah is all about the judgment against Edom for what they've done. So we're going to pick it up in verses 1 through 9. It's kind of how I divided up. The first part is chapters 1 through 9. He begins by talking about the destruction of Edom. By the way, these verses are very similar to what we saw already in previous prophets, specifically chapter 49 of Jeremiah. And if you ever, we won't do it this morning specifically, but if you want to go through Jeremiah 49 and compare it to Obadiah, verses 1 through 9 is not quite word for word, but it's very, 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 very close. The topics, the wording, the metaphors, the phrasing is very, very similar between the two. It's almost like Obadiah said, hey, Jeremiah, I'm going to come over to your house for a while and copy off of what you wrote and then kind of turn it into my own book. For the first several verses. That's probably not what happened. But Obadiah might have read Jeremiah and said, under inspiration, of course, and said, you know what, I'm going to elaborate on this just a little bit. So I'm going to take what you wrote, Jeremiah, and kind of expand upon it just a little bit and give it to the people to make God's own point here. I don't know if that happened or not. Maybe God inspired it separately. I have no idea. But either way, the two are very, very similar. But take a look at this and compare back and forth sometime. Verse 1. Thus says the Lord concerning Edom, we have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations. Rise up, let us rise up against her for battle. Exactly what Jeremiah 49:14 says. Verse 2, behold, I will make you small among the nations. You shall be utterly despised, talking about what will happen to Edom. Jeremiah 49:15. Verse 3, the pride of your heart has deceived you, you who lived in the cleft of the rocks, which, by the way, is exactly where Edom's nation was. In your lofty dwelling, you who say in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? Describing Edom's mentality and their philosophy and their attitude. Though you soar aloft like the eagle, though your nest is among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Edom, you've been proud, you've been haughty, you've been hostile against my people. Therefore, I'm going to take you down, God says. Verse 5, if thieves came to you, if plunderers came by night, how you've been destroyed. Would they not steal only enough for themselves? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not at least leave gleanings? If you were a field, at least there'd be something left. But when I glean you, there will be nothing left, God says. Comparable to Jeremiah 49:9. Continue in verse 6. He says, how Esau has been pillaged, that his treasures are sought out. We'll continue in verse 7. All your allies have driven you to your border. Those at peace with you have deceived you. They have prevailed against you. Those who eat your bread have set a trap beneath you. You have no understanding. Will I not on that day, declares the Lord, destroy the wise men out of Eden and understanding out of Mount Esau? And your mighty men shall be dismayed, O Timon, that every man from Mount Esau will be cut off by the slaughter. And again, he parallels Jeremiah chapter 49, talking about the total 100% annihilation of the nation of Edom and the destruction and slaughter that God's going to bring on them for primarily their treatment of God's own chosen people, Israel. Verses 10 through 16 then, I'll give you a second on that slide there. There's the comparison if you want it. You can look that up later online if you wish. Verses 10 to 16 make it clear that the destruction of Edom is because of their awful treatment of Israel and Judah over the years. He elaborates on this. He says, because of the violence done to your brother Jacob, the shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. On the day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gates, and lots cast for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You were helping them, you were cheering them, you were encouraging them. Verse 12, but do not gloat on the day of your brother, in the day of his misfortune. Do not rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their ruin. Do not boast in the day of their distress. Verse 15 continues on, for the day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your own head, which is why I called the book what? Subtitled it, What Goes Around Comes Around. As you have done to my people, God says, so I will do to you. You were mean to them, now I'm going to be mean to you. You cheered their destruction, now I'm going to cheer your destruction. I'm going to get you back for this. Why does God say that? Just because he likes to be petty and vindictive? Because he likes to slap people around? Because he's angry and having a temper tantrum? No, this is a fulfillment of a promise he made long, long ago, isn't it? This is not new information. How did God say that he would treat people whom... Yeah, I said that right. How did God say he would treat the people who mistreated his people? In case you don't remember, it's up there in blue font on the screen for you. Back in Genesis chapter 12, he said to Abraham, I will bless those that bless you, but those that curse you, I will curse. And for so many years, the people of Edom had cursed God's chosen people. And so God said, all right, I promised, I warned you, here's what it's going to happen. You curse my people, now I'm going to curse you, and I'm going to wipe you out. I will annihilate you. Which means that even after all of the rebellion, and even after all the things that the people had done against God, and the idolatry and, misbehaviors and disobedience that they had done, after all of that, what was the conditions of God's covenant with his people? Again, it's been a while since I put this slide up here, but hopefully you remember it. You remember this? Still unconditional. God made an unconditional promise to Abraham and his people. He said, no matter what, I will be faithful to you. I will bless you that bless you. I will curse those that curse you. You are my chosen people, no matter what. And even after all the idolatry, all the rebellion, all the stuff that they've done, God says, even though you are not faithful, I will still be faithful to my promise. I will still watch out for you. And still this covenant is in force, in effect today, and the people of Eden have cursed you nonstop since the day you've come into the land. Therefore, I will curse them in return, and I will wipe that out with no remnant, no hope, and no coming back. That's what God says to his people. So, why would God write something that is a pronouncement against Edom Edom and only let the people of Judah read it. Why would they do that? I think from this we can start to see part of the encouragement, can't we? Has God forgotten his people in the midst of the destruction? Has he abandoned his covenant to them? No, absolutely not. As Jeremiah just said in Lamentations, his faithfulness is still there to them. His hope is still in God. Even though God is the one inflicting punishment, his covenant is still rock solid. He has not forgotten it, and he's not abandoning his people, even though they abandon him. We have to finish this up quickly, but the last part of Obadiah, verses 17 through 21, talk about God's restoration of Israel. Although, by the way, there will be no remnant or restoration of Edom in verse 18, Israel will once again be present and powerful. So verse 17, it says, well, verse 16, the day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. As you have done, it will be returned to you. Verse 17, but in Mount Zion there shall be those who escape, and it shall be holy. And the house of Jacob shall possess their own possessions. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, the house of Joseph a flame, but the house of Esau will be stubble. And they shall burn them and consume them, and there shall be no survivor of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. And if Jacob and Israel is a fire and a flame, and Esau is stubble, what happens together when you put stubble and flame together? What happens? Let me ask it this way. Who wins, fire or stubble? Every single time. I'm putting my money on the flame at this point, right? Stubble never wins. Stubble's always consumed until it's nothing there but ashes maybe and a little bit of smoke and soot floating up in the air. There's nothing left. Fire always wins. God says, Judah and Israel, they're going to be the fire at the end of all this. Esau, you're going to be the stubble at the end of all this. I know it looks bad right now for Israel and for my people because I'm judging them. But you just wait till I judge you, Esau, because I have promised to preserve these people. You've mistreated my people, and I will wipe you out. And I am not promising you survivors the way I promised to preserve my people, because my covenant's with them, and you have poked them in the eye, and I'm angry at you, and I'm going to wipe you out. He finishes the book here in the last couple of verses. We're out of time. We'll only read the last verse. He says, Saviors shall go up to Mount Zion to rule Mount Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. So once again, I ask the same question one more time, and we'll close with this. Why would God write a book about Edom and only give it to the people of Judah? Because it communicates a couple of very, very important things that the people needed to hear at a time of crisis like this, isn't it? What did he communicate to the people? My covenant is still in effect. I have not forgotten or abandoned you. And someday I will restore the way that I promised that I would. 3 things that when you see nothing but chaos and destruction all around you, suffering, famine, sword, fire, death, these are things that you need to hear. God is still watching over you. He will take vengeance upon your enemies just because I said I would. Not because you deserve it, but because my word is faithful to you. And that's my letter to Edom, even though they'll never even be around to read it. But you, Israel, get to read it because I'm faithful to you. Obadiah is not such a bad book either, is it? That's pretty good. Kind of a weird, quirky book. Not written the way you'd expect, but very effective. All right, let's pray and we'll dismiss. Dear God, we thank you again for today. We can finish up some of these minor prophets. Always a good book. No matter which book we turn to, it's always a good book. We can't get away from it. That's because you wrote them all. Then they're all important and they're all valuable for us. Help us to learn from each and every one and see you through all of them. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. You are dismissed.